Hi and welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Fumi and today this is the dress that we're going to be making in green instead. I'm also going to quickly show you how you can do this with your basic dress pattern, so stay tuned if you're interested in that. Alright, so as per usual, we're starting out with everything that we need for this project. You can pause or take a screenshot so you can get everything, and also there's our dress pattern. First of all, I folded over my fabric on both sides, as you can see, two closed edges. This part right here is where I'm going to cut the front, and then the other side is for the back, because usually the front is smaller because you need to have the zipper allowance at the back. So take note of the way I folded it. I folded across, like I folded this horizontally. So if you're using a fabric that is that has maybe like patterns and stuff like that, this might not work based on the pattern of your fabric, but this is a plain fabric, so this works just fine. So you can see that's the middle where the raw edges meet, and this is a closed edge, and the other end too is a closed edge, just so we're clear here. Now starting off with our dress pattern, this basic dress pattern is like, this is like a fitted dress with darts. So if you don't know how to do this, you can refer to the basic dress pattern, which I have linked in the description box. And as you can see, I've laid it on the part of the fabric where I said we're cutting out the front, and you can see I've laid it directly on the fold. Also, from the picture of what we're doing, you can see that the neckline is slightly different. So I'm just going to show you how you can arrive at that neckline using your regular round neck basic dress pattern. So from the armhole, I'm just using my free hand to sort of still going with a curved line from the neckline to the armhole. So somewhere around the midpoint of the neckline, I'm just going and connecting that to my armhole. This is like, there isn't any calculation here. I'm just using my free hand. If you have a French curve or a curved rule or something like that, that would be very helpful at this point. So you can see my line is not exactly straight, it's like slightly curved, coming from the armhole and stopping at the neckline right here, and that is basically it. So you're just going to cut and follow this new line, eliminating that shoulder area, and that's basically it for the neckline. And then for the rest of the dress, you basically just follow the pattern, except you want to alter the length, maybe make it shorter or longer, but it's basically the same thing. I also noticed that for the waistline, like on the waistline on the original dress, there is a stitch that runs across. So basically when they were cutting, they cut the upper half separate from the lower half and then join them together. But I'm just going to cut my whole front as a one piece instead. And that's basically it if you're going to use a basic bodice dress pattern for this particular dress. You know, to cut the back is basically just the same thing, but you add in your zipper allowance, and that's it. So next up, we're going to see how to do this exact same dress, basically the same thing we just did with the pattern, but without the pattern. As you can see here, I have my fabric all folded up and ready to start cutting. Now the first thing that I'm going to do is to measure, to take my hip measurement divided by 4 plus an inch or 2 for sewing allowance, and then I'm going to make sure that this area here that I folded for the front is enough, like is at least that measurement, because the hip here is the widest measurement for my, I'm doing this dress for my friend, so her hip is her widest horizontal measurement. For some people it's their bust, for some people it's the waist. So you take your widest horizontal measurement and make sure that you have enough space here to mark that measurement. And I have a bit, like an inch more than that, so I'm just reducing it just a bit because I'm trying to conserve my fabric as much as possible. Now starting off with my shoulder measurements, I divided that by 2, and that's what you can see me marking right here. So shoulder measurement divided by 2, and then you mark that. For the width of the neck, I'm going with just like almost 4 inches, about 3 3/4 of an inch. and then I'm marking it. And then for the depth, I'm going for 3.5 inches. Usually I would use 4, but the neck of this one is kind of high, so 3.5 inches is just fine. You can even use 3 if you like. So I'm just marking it, connecting my points. Next up, I'm taking that same 7 inches that we used, which is half of our shoulder measurement, and I'm just marking it so that I can extend the line down to draw the armhole. And then for the depth of my armhole, I usually use the bust measurement divided by 6 plus 1.5 inches. So I've marked that, and then on that line I'm going to mark my bust measurement divided by 4 plus 1 inch for sewing allowance. So on that point where your armhole stops, you measure your bust measurements divided by 4 plus 1.5 inches for your sewing allowance. I'm sorry, plus 1 inch. Some people use 1.5 inches though. Now for my half length, because I want to mark where my dart is going to be, so I'm marking the point of my half length because that's like the middle of your dart. That's where that's supposed to be the middle of your dart. And then on the half length, I'm marking waist measurement divided by 4 plus 1 inch for sewing allowance, and then another inch for my darts. Now from that point, I'm also marking my hip points, so that on the line of my hip points, I'm going to measure my hip divided by 4 inches. Divided by 4 plus 1 inch for sewing allowance. I usually use 1 inch for sewing allowance, but you could use 1.5 inches. You could use 2 inches, but 1 inch works just fine for me. And now, as you can see me doing, I'm just connecting all of the points that I already marked. And now I'm just marking the length of my dress. And then across the length, like across the hem of the dress, I'll take my hip measurement and minus 1.5 inches. And then that's what I'm going to mark on the hem of the dress. Then just connect my hip point to that point. And this is what I have. My whole dress is basically already outlined. Now I'm going to do the neckline or the armhole, just that halter neck design, basically bringing the armhole to the neck point, to the neckline. I'm sorry. But this is the rest of the dress. This is my dart. And basically for darts, like there is no one size fits all that I do for every single dress, but the midpoint is basically your half length, and then the upper leg is usually shorter than the lower leg for the front of the dress, because that lower leg area is where you have like your lower belly and all of that, and it just looks better cinched in. And then the upper leg is usually shorter because on that chest area, that's where you have the bust area, which is usually fuller, so that I don't usually extend the upper leg so high. And then for this particular dress, I used 6 inches for the length of the lower leg, and then 4 inches for the length of the upper leg of my darts. But like this varies based on like the person's measurements and, you know, different bodies basically. And then usually for the back of the dress, the upper leg would extend higher, and then the lower leg would be a bit shorter because that's like the hip and bum area. So yeah. All right, so next up, I'm just going to pin everything in place just to make sure nothing moves and there's no mistake or, you know, any little accidents. And then I'm going to cut out my dress. And this is it. This is the shape. It's a short dress. This is our neckline, our armhole, and the body of the dress. Also, I noticed that on the original dress, they had a side dart, just like at the side, a dart at the side of the front piece. And I don't usually do side darts, but I just thought maybe I should add that. So I came up from the armhole by an inch. As you can see here, you can see where I marked my armhole, the original armhole. I came up by an inch to give some allowance for my darts. So I'm going to show you how I construct the darts later on, but like, yeah. But I'm not going to do this on the back because we're not putting any side darts on the back. You don't put side darts on the back of a dress. You just need it for the front sometimes, and that's basically it. But other than that, yeah, this is our dress. This is what we have right now, and we're good to go for the front piece. Now for our back piece, as you can see, it's not, the folded edge is not completely aligned. I left out some space, exactly an inch and a half, for my zipper allowance. That is what you can see here. So on the waistline, I would come in by half an inch and I'll smooth it out. I'll show you that when I cut it so you understand a bit better. For the neckline as well, I'm going to come up by just half an inch for the back, because the back neck, I'd like it to just be slightly higher than the front neck. And then remember that 1 inch allowance we put on the armhole, we're not adding that to the back, so take note of that. And so with that in mind, we can get straight to cutting our dress. So I'm just pinning the front piece to the back piece, and here we have it. I've cut out back, and as you can see, I came in at the waistline by half an inch and also at the hem, because your back is not like as straight as your ruler. So just to follow the curves of the back, I usually come in on the waist by half an inch and on the hem as well by half an inch. And you can see it has like this nice curve to it. This is what lets the back sit perfectly well on your back. And you can see I came up by half an inch on my neckline as well. Like I said, just a little bit, just half an inch is fine. You can make it higher if you'd like though, but this is what my back piece looks like. Now the next piece I want to cut is my facing, which is what I'm going to use to finish up the neckline and the armhole. In the original dress, I don't think they had this. I think they finished off with like a little bias finishing on the neckline and on the armhole, but for me, I want to use a facing. So I'm going to cut my facing right now, and I'm going to show you how I do it. Here you can see I've laid the front piece of my dress folded over on a folded piece of fabric. You can see that it stops just there. It stops like a few inches after the armhole, and I'm just going to cut and follow the line of my dress. After doing the facing, next part I'm cutting is the ruffles. So I folded over what was left of my fabric. I folded this over 4 times. That's what you're seeing here, and I measured 15 inches in length, and that's the 2 markings that you can see right here and right here. So it's 15 inches in length, and I'm going to cut that for my ruffles. Also, I have these straps here that I cut, and I'm using that for my sleeves, for these straps that you can see as the sleeves. And mine is about 1.5 inches wide and then about 22 inches long. I cut 4 of these pieces because I want to do my sleeves slightly different from the original picture. You'd be able to tie the straps on the shoulder, and this is what my facing looks like. Now first of all, I want to start off by sewing up my straps. So I'm going to fold them over neatly and fold and sew on a straight line to finish up all 4 straps. These are the pieces of my ruffles, the 15-inch long pieces that I showed you earlier. I've cut it out, and this is what it looks like when I spread it out like this. So you can see it's quite long, it's quite wide. So because I really want my ruffles to be full. Now to the straps, this is how I'm folding it over. Almost like the way you see bias tapes folded over, but a little bit different, to make sure all of the rough edges are neatly tucked inside. And then I'm going to run a straight stitch all the way down, and on the edge you can see me closing up the end like this, and then folding it over neatly. If you can also iron this before you start sewing, that would make it a lot easier, but I was in a bit of a hurry, to be honest, so I just folded it over and went straight to my machine. These are what the straps look like, all 4 of them. I'm going to press them so they can look neater and smoother. But this is the front of my dress, and you can see that I've laid the facing on top of it. And this is our neckline, this is our armhole. Everything is looking good so far. So I'm going to sew the facing to the dress. You can see that I've laid them front facing front, so the right side of the fabric is facing each other. This that's how it's going to be sewn before turning it right side out. So I'm just going to follow the line of my armhole and my neckline. Also, while sewing it, I'm going to attach these straps for my sleeves right at those corners, the 2 straps right at those corners there, at the corners of the neckline. So I'm going to sandwich it between the facing and the actual body of the dress like this, and then just place the facing back on top so that when I run my stitch, it's going to hold it right there in place, and by the time I turn it over, it will be attached to our dress. I'm going to do the same thing for the back as well with the remaining 2 straps. So you remember we cut those 2 15-inch long pieces for our ruffles. These are them right here. I had some leftover fabric, so I decided this fabric right here is leftover, so I decided to cut it to 15 inches in length as well, so that I can add it to the ruffles, because like I said, I really want that volume for the ruffles. So of course, the more fabric you have, the fuller your ruffles will be, so I decided to add a bit more. And this is what they look like joined together. I joined all 3 pieces together. You can see my seams, and I finished off the rough edges as well. So this is what I have. It's kind of like a large circle, so this is what it looks like, finished edges and all. I joined here, and I also joined here as well as one other place because there were 3 pieces. So I joined all 3 pieces together, and this is what it looks like laid out flat. So they are ready for me to gather them up and then attach them to the dress. But before that, let's get back to our dress. So this is my dress. I've placed my facing, I've done my darts, I've attached the straps for the sleeves. It's looking really good and I'm really excited. Now the next thing we need to do is start on that side dart for the front piece. So I'm coming down from the armhole by 1.5 inches. And then I want kind of like a slanted line because the side dart is a bit slanted. So I'm coming backwards from where my front dart stops. I'm going backwards by 1.5 inches. So yeah, from that point right there, I'm just going to mark it to make sure I don't make any mistakes. And then I'm coming back by 1.5 inches, and I'm going to mark that 1.5 inches. That is where my side dart is going to stop. So from this point to that point. And then you can use your ruler to sort of connect a slanted line. which is what you can see me doing here, just trying to connect it. The fabric is quite silky. By the way, the name of this fabric is Duchess, so it's a bit slippery. It feels a bit silky on the surface. So you can see I have my slanted line here. It's a bit rough, but on either side of that line, you're going to mark 1/2 inch. That's how wide the dart is going to be. So basically, this is the side dart. And after doing the darts, we're going to lay the back piece on the front piece and then join the sides together all the way to the bottom. And this is what we have after sewing our side darts and joining the front and back pieces. The middle right here is the front piece, and you can see the back pieces on either side. I haven't joined them together at the back yet, and I haven't also put my zipper, but you can see right here this faint chalk line. I've marked the midpoint of my front piece because I want to make the markings that I'm going to follow for attaching the ruffles to the dress. So the original picture had the ruffles attached sort of like a V shape in the front, but I don't want to go for the same shape. I think I want to do mine as like a slight U instead of a sharp V. So that's what I'm going to try to draw. I'm just using my free hand and my chalk to draw until I'm happy with the results that I have. After I'm done with my with making my markings, I'm going to close up the back and attach my zipper. So this is the back, and I'm going to start joining from around this point because that's where the zip is going to stop. So I'm going to join from that point to the bottom, and then the upper area is where our zipper is going to be. You can let me know if you want to see a tutorial on attaching a zipper. So I'm basically just making my markings now for where I'm going to attach the ruffles. So you can see I'm going for more of like a slight U shape instead of the sharp V that the original dress has. And then I'm measuring from the bottom to make sure that the markings are even on both sides of the dress. You wouldn't want one side looking higher than the other. And I'm just following that through to the back as well. Always measure to make sure that everything is even and it doesn't look higher or lower on one side. So this is what I have, and now I'm going to close the back and attach my zipper finally. And this is what our dress is looking like. The body is basically done, and this is the fabric for that we're going to use for the ruffles. I've marked 4 different points. That's this end right here, the other end on the other side, as well as the midpoint. That's right here. You can see my faint chalk markings. So 1, 2, 3, and then 4 right behind this one. So we're going to use this to make sure that our ruffles are evenly distributed. The markings on the 2 ends are going to match up to the 2 sides, and then these ones on the middle are going to be the center front and the center back respectively. So I'm going to pin these 4 points in place and then attach my ruffles. So you can see I've attached the ruffles. I usually just do this manually, like I ruffle up the fabric with my hands as I go. Let me know if you'd like a separate tutorial on that, but this is what my ruffles are looking like, and I like the volume. I like how it looks so far, and it's all neat, and I'm so excited. Oh my gosh, this is the dress. It's basically almost done. We just need to finish up the hem and the dress would be ready. And here it is, finished hem and all. All it needs right now is for somebody to put this lovely dress on.